About 8 pounds.
Oh, really?
Yep, it's a fairly light tent.
Which most of the time, 3-person tents, you don't want more than 2 people in.
No. So this is one of the regular backcountry sites. We have 4 designated throughout the campground, and we built them all to be about 16 foot by 16. 16 by 16 is the size dynamic we were looking for. That's about 256 square footage area within the campsites. And I had done a bunch of math and kind of figured out the average of what campers were bringing out to these facilities. And that was determined to provide adequate space for 6 people to stay in. So right now the sites are primitive cleared space. We're keeping them like this right now as we're opening the facility so that folks can get out here and experience it, start to build the traction and the basically getting folks to talk about it and speak to each other and get the word out. Eventually what will be happening, and this is going to be new for our facilities in particular, is we're going to be designating tent pads for all of our campsites. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a 16 by 16 box filled with crusher run gravel. That's the adequate size for tent stakes and tents to be really set on. If you've ever stayed at a national park facility or anywhere run by recreation.gov, they are all tent pads built of 4x4 lumber or sometimes 6x6 with crusher run gravel set up and leveled. And so that's what we're going to be eventually doing here at Meadowcreek and potentially at all other campgrounds that we build or renovate throughout the years. The reason for that is we want to make sure that the campsites stay the same size throughout the years. Again, with Dinky Line, but if you've also ever been to the Collins West campground, those campsites have grown tremendously in size due to overexpansion and overuse from visitors. And we feel that by setting up the tent pad and keeping the tent pad as a level and ideal place for a visitor to stay on, that will encourage them to stay on the tent pad instead of setting up off in the brush and accidentally expanding the site. And so that is an asset that, and an aspect of this campground that we're going to be updating with the coming year. We're going to keep it similar to how the rest of the park is right now, so that we can get visitor input, collect data, see how people are using the campground, see what kind of changes, information we get. And then once our peak season is kind of ended, gets towards December and January, we will come back out to these areas, shut down the campsites for about a week, rebuild with the tent pads, bring the gravel in, and then reopen them with a big celebration media posting to encourage folks to come out and try them with the new tent pads. And that's something that's been in talks for some time. We've been working specifically with John and our friends group on purchasing the gravel and getting the gravel delivered. The friends group also purchased we already have the 4x4s on site here in the park. They're stashed away right now, and then the gravel is going to be getting ordered as well, brought on dump trucks, set up in the area, and then once we've had that season of use from visitors, we'll come out here and rebuild with the tent pads so that folks will come back with the springtime and the revitalization of people coming out and camping and say, oh hey, it got even better out here, and we'll be excited for it. And hopefully that that survey and that feedback that we get will allow us to do it at all of our other campgrounds as well, because that's one of the big issues we have within our park is our campsites are all over the place in terms of size, and we want to make sure we're keeping folks within their campsites and away from accidentally setting up their tents on poison ivy, on endangered plants, accidentally setting up their tents in their neighbor's campsite as well. That's a big thing as well. For this campground, we designed it to look almost like a stick man. Our head is the group camp, the trail is the body and the neck, and then the arms and the legs are the regular sites. And we alternated where they are in relation to where they with the trails so that they're not as close to each other as one might seem. We put them about 50 feet apart so that you can still almost see the campsite. We're here in campsite 3. If I look over that way, I can just barely see the cleared space of campsite 1. But there is enough thick foliage of the holly and other vegetation and material to dissuade a visitor from setting up a social trail, hopefully. We shall see with time what that does. That way we can keep our visitors in their campsite and not accidentally wandering and walking into their neighbor's campsite. The other aspect of it, we wanted to make sure visitors could find the main trail easily. So it's all almost perpendicular to the main trail system. So I, standing here at campsite 3, never have to wonder about where the main trail is because it's always directly ahead of me out from the campsite. It's not like in a loop or a lollipop where there can sometimes be some confusion, especially once social trails develop, of how do I get back to the main trail and find the privy or get out of here, basically. So that's where our philosophy has been on building the campsites. Does anybody have any questions right now? Yes,
I have
Katie.
two. You mentioned a survey. Are you capturing email addresses and then automatically emailing a survey to people who have
So
stayed?
the main way that the state parks collects that sort of data is when you come and stay in our parks, usually after you've stayed, it's usually about a day or so, you get an email asking for customer feedback. It sometimes goes to your junk mail, but if it goes to your regular inbox or your junk mail, you'll get an email from our park that asks for your feedback or a Ask TN survey. And that's an excellent way for us to collect that data. We also do a lot of just walking through and talking to folks that stay in our campgrounds. We can access them relatively easily, as you saw from our drive-in. So sometimes we might come out here on an afternoon and talk to folks that are hiked out and are camping, see what they think, write that information down, bring it back, and use that for research. So that's one of the ways we collect that data. But it's mostly through the Ask TN surveys, because that's where we get visitors that have come out and stayed. They will sometimes tell us about what they saw, what they experienced, give feedback, and that helps us out tremendously.
And then the gravel, is it going to be covering this whole 16 by 16 area?
Yes,
Okay.
it will be
That's
what
a
your
lot of gravel.
that will be your surface to set up your tent on. That's what we want you to be using, so that you're not setting up off in the brush, off to the side. The only aspect about the campsites out here that we will have to talk to the public about is hammocks, especially for the primitive sites, because as you can tell, we did our best to preserve trees that will work well for hammocks, but there is limitations to what we can do. If the trees are just not quite there all the way, we have to make some, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for?
Hammock
Compromise.
friendly.
We have to make some compromises with our hammock users. And so as a part of that, we've updated some of our literature for campsites to include a little disclaimer saying, hammock campers, please use just the trees that are closest to the site. Their impact is very low in comparison to a tent because they're not setting up flat in the surface. As long as they're not damaging trees, it should be a-okay.